lot of thoughts and emotions to people all over the world, because you'll find this replica all over the world. And especially to students and graduates from here for generations. They're going to remember this grotto, and it will bring something beautiful to their heart. That's what you find when you go down into the Domain in Lourdes, France, and you cross the street and you enter down into that area where the river runs through and the basilica sits and the cave. And it's just a different feeling. If you ever get a chance, go. You will be healed. You'll be healed of anxiety. You'll be healed of the cares of this world, because you'll realize that you've just seen a little pinprick into heaven, and you'll feel that in the depths of your soul. So it's a great gift, and it's a gift for me to be able to be here tonight speaking in front of Our Lady of Lourdes. She represents, of course, motherhood in a very beautiful way. And by extension, it's, I'm sure, no accident that we have the Holy Family off to the side here. So we can ask them to guide us and help us in our role as parents. I always wondered about St. Joseph. I mean, you think about it, there he's sitting at breakfast with God and his mother. I mean, what do you talk about? Can I get you some orange juice? It's got to be a very strange thing. But yet, what we've learned about St. Joseph, it was very quiet in the early church. But more and more, we've seen scholarship grow up on the person of St. Joseph, and he's named terror of demons for a reason. So what a great model for us fathers, and our Blessed Mother, what a great model for us mothers, or you mothers. I know I'm from California, but I didn't really mean that. Sorry. Can you bleep that out on the video? Sorry, yes. But in our work in parenting, we use these two as models. I think the book that we have, Raising Upright Kids, they did a pretty good job. So let's model after them. I asked, Rosemary threw me some ideas on a theme for tonight, or a title for tonight, and I asked her to insert one word, the word musings, because I'm not some expert that has it all figured out. I've raised children and now am enjoying grandchildren. But I do have a unique and beautiful perspective of 35 years teaching and administrating in Catholic schools. And when you do that, you cannot not be involved with families. It's a very interesting, beautiful, difficult, intimate position to be a headmaster or even a teacher. And over 35 years, you become in some way part of so many of these families and so many of the trials and the successes and the sorrows that come, and you learn a lot about human nature. So I can't and would never purport to say that I'm an expert, but I've experienced an awful lot, even if vicariously. I would think maybe in some ways an awful lot more than a lot of other people, given the career that God thrust me into. I think of those young people in World War II. I met a man in Santa Paula who he'd always come to breakfast with his TWA Airlines jumpsuit. And he was 18 years old when he was made a pilot in World War II. 18 years old, a high school senior. And he's in charge of all the lives in that rickety can of steel. And how many of our relatives didn't come home from that? But here's an 18-year-old given that responsibility, given the high degree of technicality that it takes to run and operate a plane, and to be a leader to all the men in his group, 18 years old. Amazing how they took that on. They grabbed the difficulty, they grabbed the suffering, they grabbed the challenge, and they did amazing things. An 18-year-old. So I think as I was introduced to be a headmaster, kind of like Rosemary, I was pretty young at the time, but I just took it on and I worked according to what I was taught, principles. And that's what I would like to mostly reflect on tonight is principles. I have 3 little sections to my talk. I hope to clip through them quickly enough that we have question and answer at the end. I know I'm allowed 3 hours to talk, but I only plan for 2, so we should be really good. But speaking of principles, let me just start out. This is, I have my talk here, and I'll try to refer to it as much as possible, but other things come up, and I think that the Holy Spirit is knocking on my door and asking me to bring this up. So one of the great works on education in our church is Divini Ilius Magistri. You probably have heard about it from Rosemary in the past, but Pius XI, back in 1929, writes this one sentence, and think how germane this is for today. There is so great and deplorable an absence, of clear and sound principles, even regarding problems that are most fundamental. Ripped from the headlines in 2022. That's Pope Pius in 1929. So this problem isn't new. And I think principles is almost always the answer. It's the one thing that we have to go back to. And we as parents are rolling through our lives. It's frenetic because life is frenetic and kids are more frenetic. So we have to manage all of that while at the same time keeping our eyes on principles. So the 3 little sections I'd like to run through tonight are one little piece on kind of the soul of parenting, that which rests on principles. Second, 7 sound suggestions. You like that? I adore alliteration, apparently, I thought, yeah. And then finally, I want to bounce through a highlights of Dr. Ray Guarendi's book, Everybody's Favorite Shrink, right? I don't know if you've read him before. I'm sure some of you have, but it's really wonderful stuff. So I'll get to that to close out tonight. I want to say, though, about Dr. Ray is sometimes he says things that are both campy and profound, especially with the names he gives children like Bruno or his daughter Bliss, or when he's talking about certain things, he tries to align the name to the topic he's talking about. So he's campy, but he's really profound. And actually, when you get down to brass tacks with him, he's super challenging. He's very radical because he's calling you back to the principles of humanity and the principles of parenting. But I would say that we're all Christian parents, so we should look forward to being radical, because that's what God wants us to be, radical in the right sense. Radical coming from the Latin radix, meaning root. The root of our nature, the root of our being, the root of our end. So, the soul of parenting. Let me start off with a quote, actually a few quotes, but this one is really important, and it's particular to tonight's talk. C.S. Lewis said, "Aim at heaven and you will get earth thrown in." He doesn't stop there. Aim at earth and you'll get nothing. Now that's one you'll want to rewind, rinse, and repeat. because we have to keep that in mind. That's the title of what I was asked to talk about. And I think the reason is because it's everything. We as human beings, all of creation was made for one thing. We tend to forget it in the speed of the daily life, but we need to stop and remember that. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. Aim at heaven, you'll get earth thrown in. Aim at earth, and you'll get neither. Just a couple other quotes to chew on. You can ask about them later, or I guess now they're going to be internationally recorded, so you can refer back to them later. But a couple of quotes that we've used around our schools over the last 30 plus years. It's better to build children than repair men. Teach a man to delight what he should delight in, and to shun what he should shun. This is the goal of both teachers and parents. W.E.B. Du Bois. I insist that the object of all true education is not to make men carpenters, but to make carpenters men. There's a twist on college and career readiness. Huh? If you make them good men, they'll be really good carpenters, or really good cooks, or really good lawyers. There's a lawyer joke coming, but I won't say it, no. She's always, sorry lawyers, we just have to do that. And then finally, this one is particularly germane to home and school working together to build the dispositions in our children so that they are rightly ordered. Those dispositions which are essential to put each one of us, I mean, this is good for us too, right? To put us back on that trajectory to heaven. Aquinas says, 3 things are necessary for salvation of man: to know what he ought to believe, to know what he ought to desire, and to know what he ought to do. Virtue, right? That's what virtue helps guide you in. So when I was first thinking about talking to parents, an image that my wife often brings up in thinking about parenting, and when she sort of nails me to the dining room chair and won't let me go for 3 hours so we could talk about how to raise the children correctly, there's one image she's brought up over our 35 years of marriage that is just so profound, and I want you to think about it. Whether you're a grandparent or whether you are still in school and not married yet, this is something you want to think about going forward. We're holding that baby, that new first beautiful little baby. It's an image of eternity. It's ours. It's unique. The only individual like this that ever has been or ever will be, and destined for all of eternity. You're just holding that in the quiet of the evening or something, and there's your little baby. What do you think about? You just look and marvel and thank God? That's beautiful. That's wonderful. But our mind also does, should, and will go other places. Now, I could go down the list of questions that sort of are questions maybe ripped from the headlines, and all the aberrations and horrible things that we see today that is just this mass confusion of humanity and what they're about. I won't go there, but you can run through that exercise by yourself. But what I think about is, what do I hope for him? Who do you want her to be? Who do you want her to be? How do you know what you should want? How do I get him there? How do I handle her first tantrum, his first swear word, her first crush, his first fender bender, her first fender bender? There's a lot of questions. And you're not going to ask all those when you're holding your 3-week-old. But these are all questions that should come up before they have their first fender bender or their first crush or what college they're going to go to, etc. Schooling, friends, sports, hobbies, prayer, habits, food, travel, manners, technology, hard work, dispositions. I mean, the list could go on for all 3 hours. There's so many questions. There's too many unless we are able to grasp on to the principles. The principles based in our nature, our faith, and our ultimate end. And we as parents have to take this on. If you're not a parent yet, take it on now. Andrew, where are you? You need to take this on now because you need to do this right from the get-go. Right? I will order everything according to the principles of our nature and our divine call. Happiness is our aim, eternal happiness, beatitude. So in the answer to every question, we have to show it up against that principle. Is this going to make them happy? Not the kind of happy that we are thinking of if we have a 7th grade girl wanting to go to a friend's house tonight. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Everything is subjected to true happiness, to the long term. And it all sounds easy, right? Just, okay, everything's good, everything's subjected to happiness. Happiness, I think the greatest happiness that we have on earth as that peak into heaven, other than maybe a trip to Lourdes, is Easter. Because we go through Lent, and I know that if you have much life experience, you've had some good Lents and some bad Lents. And you know if you've gone through a particularly good Lent, and we know what that means, suffering, right? It means becoming masters of ourselves and our desires and passions. If we go through a particularly good Lent, Easter is the joyous moment we can experience in the liturgical year. It's amazing. And so keep in mind that if happiness is our end, there's a way to get there. And the way to get there involves suffering. And this is virtue. We see it all over. We've seen it from time immemorial. But it's something that is maybe waning today. So there are seven key points that I just wanted to bounce through quickly. That over 35 years I've seen this happens a lot. So it probably happens by nature. We as human beings are fallen, so we all have similar problems. And yet there's one principle and there's one end that we're all destined to. And so I think we as parents can work together to help each other overcome a lot of these defects that we have. So I've enumerated 7 of them, and I'll bounce through them real quickly. The first is emotions. Do we parent on emotion? I know we parent on emotion in ourselves, but how much do we parent on the emotions of the children? They pitch a fit, they nag, they do this, that, or the other thing. There's another endless list of things that kids do to express their emotions and try to pry you from what your understanding of your duty is, of what you understand that is best for them. They don't want that. They want what they want. And so they use this emotional manipulation. Let me just say this. My experience with students and parents in the headmaster's office has been one in which the parent usually is embarrassed by the emotions of their child, does not want to go home to a fight with their child, and so they're going to give in. And they give in just to calm it down right now. And there's a bit of rightness about that because you don't want the child disturbing some kind of conversation with adults. On the other hand, are you teaching the child in that instance? Are they annoying you so you hand them your iPad so they can go off and play Donkey Kong? Is that still a thing? No, sorry. Wow, I am old. But at least I knew a digital game. That's pretty good. What is that teaching them? We see it all the time in restaurants. Just here, shut up and play something. That's dealing right into the emotion of the child. Number 2, living in the moment. Oh, this is a big one for kids. They're always living in the moment. I can't tell you how many times I've had this, parent come in, my child wants this, my child's upset with that, can you do this? Can you tell the whole school not to do this because my child... Living in the moment. So come back tomorrow and let's talk about it. And tomorrow they don't come back. Or they do come back and say, you know what? That problem disappeared. Because if we know that if we know the principle is long-term, if we know it's the final end, then we know our job as parents is the formation of our children. And so we have to tell them to, what did they say in the old days? Buck up, right? Or sit down and talk with them about it rationally. Not in the way that you're saying, oh, you just tell me how you feel and then I will let you do what you want. No, you're the authority, you're the parent. You actually do know better. So living in the moment can be a real big problem, especially for teenagers. And again, you who have been teenagers recently, you know how you went up and down so fast over the days and months. And you that have raised teenagers know the same thing. You that are about to raise teenagers, buckle up. It's not pretty. Well, it actually is. It is rather wonderful. I've always contended that teenagers are the most selfish beings on the face of the earth, and they're also the most generous beings on the face of the earth. And so we need to tap into that virtue and that God-given greatness that they have and lift it up. And we can see that easily when we look at the litany of teenage saints. And more recently, there are more. This is what we want for our children. When I'm holding my infant grandchildren, that's what I think about. I want you to be a saint. I don't care. I don't want you to suffer, but then again, I sort of do. Because if you suffer in the little things, you're going to become strong and you'll manage the big things. St. Paul says that discipline is harsh, but the end game is righteousness, right? The result of discipline is righteousness. Isn't that what you want for your child? You're not going to get righteousness by magic or by wishing for it or buying them Cocoa Pops. They're going to be happy for 5 minutes, and then you're going to hand them off to Tamara, and she's going to have to deal with them for the rest of the day. Number 3. I'm sorry, this is in here a lot. It's in all of these different lists that I have, and I think I could just say it and you'd understand, but then again, I can't presume that you do, because we're all connected to it, and that's too much media. Just a second. I think I got a text. No. Actually, I don't want to run over time. But I've got so many little pieces in this talk, and I'm not going to go through them all, but too much media, not enough books, not enough nature. Take it so deeply. I know in the Lourdes Handbook, there's a section on technology. Please read it. Read it with humility and the desire to become perfect and the desire to love the beautiful world that God gave us. And Rosemary's collected a whole lot of books over the years that she lists in there. I think there's links to it. There's that saying, this is a hard teaching. Remember Jesus said that? And thousands turned around and left. He didn't chase after them saying, oh, no, I just mean it's a symbol of my body and blood. No, he turned to his apostles and said, this is a hard teaching. Where do you stand? Well, we're presented in this 21st century with a very strange new phenomenon on the planet, this media. And lots of great good can come from it, but it has to be our tool, not our master. But it is, by nature, a very addictive thing. And so don't fool yourself thinking that, yeah, whatever. And let it creep all over, because it does creep all over. Astonishingly, even to the dinner table sometimes. So, what is the principle here? How do you react to the principle? How do you apply the principle when it comes to all of these things? Well, again, my principle is heaven. Heaven takes hard work, it takes attention, it takes imagination. I have to imagine something great up there, or I'm not going to work very hard for it. And all of these things take time. They take relationship with others. You need to know nature. Reading books, it fills you with stories, ideas, thoughts, vicarious experiences. So it can help. It's part of what makes you wise as you grow old. Why wouldn't we want that for our children? When rather we would give them this instantaneous, shallow, basically one-dimensional piece of entertainment that flits and flits and flits. And then they can get together in the hallway and start to talk about that funny thing they saw on Facebook or TikTok or whatever it is these days. That's not the higher things. Is that what I want when I'm holding my baby? I hope someday you can look at the silly cats on TikTok and laugh with your friends. Oh, heavens. We're addicted. Are we raising our children addicted too? So we need to heal ourselves, and then we can help heal our children, and then we can help heal the culture. I have a couple families at my school. They beautiful families. They've got plenty of money. They're just, I mean, there's nothing stopping them from having everything that the world offers. And they don't give their children cell phones till their senior year in college, or senior year in high school, second semester, and for the most part, a dumb phone. Because their idea is not unlike the age-old idea that the longer you delay dating, the more mature you are to handle it and think about it in the right way. Dr. Laura, back in the 90s or something, had some amazing statistics about early dating compared to premarital sex. And the percentages were just astronomical. How many of those kids engage in that? And the longer you wait, it just goes off of a cliff. Very few do the longer you wait. Well, that's good. It's also commonsensical, and I think it applies to an awful lot of things. Low expectations is number 5. This probably is related to all of these things, but I would particularly relate it to my number 2, which was living in the moment. Too often we just want the child to be happy, content, whatever. And so we let them do all sorts of things that we really don't want to let them do. If we apply the principle and say, what is the long-term goal? What is my real goal for my child? What does real happiness consist of? It's not going to be letting them just decide as a freshman, oh, I think I need to go to the public high school because I think I'm going to be the next Denver Bronco quarterback. And I need to start on that right now. Okay, that's not a bad goal to want to be a quarterback, but is this the right move? Is this really what I want for my child? There's a great book. I was talking with Andrew today about this book by David Epstein called Range. And in that book, he talks about the importance of lots of different experiences really making you much better at the thing that you do great than just honing in from your early childhood on one little thing. And I think it was Pete Sampras that he was talking about. His parents are both professional tennis players, and he went off and did everything but tennis. Well, we know what happened to Pete Sampras. If it was him, I might have the wrong person, but same story, right? World champion, best ever for a while. And he avoided that. So it can come later. Do I want to send my 15-year-old to the halls of a public school for a dream that who knows if it's going to happen? What's he going to be formed into in that public school? What's he going to be formed into in that culture that is not consistent with what I know is the final end for my child? But my child wants that. So I have to then pull the next card, card 6, authority. This may be the biggest thing that we have lost in the last 30 years in our culture, is authority. And one look at TV and you'll know what I mean. Every man is a complete idiot, and moms and dads are, if they're both in the picture, they often aren't, they're just foolish, and the kids know better. And so we get weird, and they throw the hissy fit, and they use the emotions, and we capitulate. But we are the authority. In fact, that's part and parcel of our lives. Your vocation as a married person is unitive and procreative. Unitive and procreative for one purpose: to get to heaven, to get each other to heaven. What do you spend most of your married life doing? Raising children. A great part of it, right? The hardest part of it. It's raising children. So guess what raising children is? Your ticket to heaven. So hold fast. Do not give up on authority. Go back to the principle. Apply the principle. I think one little side note here is with respect to your children, some of them are really super, they're really mature, they just get it, they're little St. Bernadettes. And God bless them, and lucky you, but they're not all that way. Sometimes you get Bruno, and that's not so fun, right? It's really important that us as parents know our children, and we're honest with ourselves about their shortcomings, because that whole trip to heaven, all the way to heaven is heaven. Well, heaven's filled with virtue. You're going to be perfectly virtuous. That means you have to build those virtues on earth, because we're not born with them. And virtue takes effort, and it takes time, it takes discipline, as St. Paul says. So you want to help your child. You can't help them if you don't know them. So be honest, be brutally honest. Not necessarily to them, but be brutally honest in yourself and with your spouse about that child and what they need and what you can do for them and to help them. So number 7 then is this kind of this is a mistake we make a lot, I'm afraid. And this doesn't help it. Neither does the television. Neither does everything else in today's world that is swirling a billion miles an hour. But this is a mistake that we can, I think, in many ways clear up most of the other mistakes if we pay attention to this mistake and fix it. And this mistake is a lack of quiet in our lives. We need more quiet. There's Michael Ortner is a fellow from back East. He was a tech guy. He says, I sold my tech company. He said, don't get me wrong, I love sports. I sold my tech company, I mean, tens of millions of dollars, I don't know what it was, but I sold my tech company to become a coach in little AYSO leagues, right? So he loves sports. He's not saying that's wrong. But to bring it to the God level that it's become and running the children everywhere all the time, he just can't do that. Keep it in its place. It's a really important human thing, but keep it in its place. Prayer time. Dinner time. Don't have things going on in the background. Sit together at dinner and talk. Car rides. Do you ever sit in your car and drive quietly? It's hard to do these days because there's 8 million podcasts and 400 stations and everything else. There are opportunities for quiet. Take them. And if there aren't very many, make them. We need to schedule that in our day. See, I don't miss lunch ever. I schedule that in my day. Do I schedule quiet into my day? I hired a fella last year, and he came out to California to work for a few months to get acclimated to the company. And we set aside 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock every day for just a little company prayer session. And we just went quiet, said our prayer, sat for a minute or so, and then went back onto our work. So there's a lot of reasons for quiet. One of them is prayer, to talk to and to listen to God. Another is for our physical body to calm down, because we get agitated when we're working all the time. Another one, especially and maybe particularly important for parents, is scheduling that quiet time for you to talk. Because all those questions I listed and a million more are going to present themselves to you every day of parenting. If we don't take the time to talk about these things and apply principles ahead of time, so you sort of have to plan for the problems that might come. You can't plan for everything. But if you're really used to discussing potential problems and how your principles will get you through those problems, you'll be amazed at how deft you will be at handling unforeseen tragedies or problems. So quiet time in a world that is so awfully noisy, make it, take it, anywhere you can. I did say I have 2 other things, 7 suggestions and then 7 little pieces from Dr. Ray. And they actually are really just 7 things, so they will take less than 7 minutes. I was listening to a headmaster friend of mine back east. He had a podcast because I wasn't quiet, couldn't take it. So I turned on Alvaro and I listened to it, and he was talking about these 7 suggestions, and they were just beautiful. So take these, think about them, employ some of them or all of them into your lives in the next 48 hours. Okay, have and use books. Create a library in your home. I had one family at a school many, many years ago. Kids were terrible at reading. Parents came storming in, complaining about our reading program. I said, well, this is what we do, this is what we do. Oh, well, it's not working for my kid. We were over at their house a week or 2 later. Cookbooks. The only books I saw in the house. Cookbooks. Huge TV. I never saw a TV that large. Create a library in your home. You are an example. They need the example. They need the time. They need to read. Number 2, establish and protect order in the common space of your home. Then you can demand it of them in their personal space, in their rooms or whatever. All my career, I have promoted a maxim that I suggest you all think about and hopefully adopt. External order produces internal order. Easy experiments for that. Just walk into something that's super disordered, see how you feel. Walk into something that's very beautiful and ordered, see how you feel. It's amazing. Number 3, family dinner every day. Now, of course, reality steps in. But if you're actually aiming for every day, the vast majority of the children's growing up years will be peppered with family dinner. At dinner, conversation. Natural conversation. This is where your children learn what you think, what you hold dear, what your aspirations are for them. Right? Have everybody talk too. All the kids need to be involved in it, because the older kids can listen to the little kids can listen to the older kids, they can share advice or surprise or whatever. Nightly family prayer. I don't know what Father Brian tells you about this, but Alvaro said, keep it short. Because what you want to do is you want to make sure you do it every night. That's super important. That's what we did in our family. We only did a decade of the rosary every night. Now that the kids are gone, we do a whole rosary, but when they were young, just a decade, because I had a very hyper child. We knew our limitations. But if you keep prayer short and you ask them for intentions, they get engaged. You don't go beyond their attention span. And then you invite them to go back to their rooms at night and have another little personal conversation with God. And they don't feel they just spent their 15 minutes of prayer time per day with mom and dad. Maybe I can give God a little more just of myself. So that's why he says family prayer, not a bad thing to keep it short. But that's a family decision. Visit elderly, the lonely, the handicapped. This gives great perspective to children. I know when we had a really bad bunch of boys in Dallas one time, we just packed them up and took them down to Children's Hospital. Back when you could do that. I tried to do that in California. Regulations have changed. You can't take kids into a hospital anymore to visit sick children. It's really sad. But boy, those boys came back different in one visit. And finally, give to charity. When you think about money and your example of money for your children, oh no, honey, we can't afford that. Don't say that to children. Say, we don't need that. It's a higher lesson. It's not about whether you can afford it or not. Do you need it? That speaks to one of Dr. Ray's things about being overstuffed. We're overstuffed these days. So scale back. So Dr. Ray's, you've got to read it. And I ask you to read it with a deference and a humility that, you know what, I'm making it, I'm an okay parent, I'm an okay Catholic, but I could be a lot better, and I could give my children much better. So read it with that. There's a lot of nuggets, there's some hard teachings in there, but read it and see what God's calling you to. He reminds us of the anti-parent age that we exist in. You've got to gain your authority back. Confront or conform. He talks about consensus parenting versus parenting. You're the authority. You know what you want for your child, principles. You raise your children according to that, not what the rest of the fourth grade moms, what the kids say that their moms are saying. There's a whole different story, right? Work from principles. Here's an important little concept. Premature worldliness delays maturity. We think we're exposing them to things at a younger and younger age so that they'll grow up faster. It works backwards. He's got all the psychologist stuff behind that, but really important thought. He's got a whole bunch of chapter 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think he's got 5 chapters in a row that talk about media. Read them. Believe him. There's so much science out there about it, and we don't want to hear it. Overstuffed, I mentioned. Influence is profoundly important on our children. We hear about peer pressure. Yeah, there is peer pressure, but you're the parent. Nobody loves that child like you do, and nobody is going to work, hopefully, as hard to get them to heaven as you will. So be careful about the influence that is on your child. My mom made me give up my best friend, who was my next door neighbor. Do you know how hard that was? 7th grade. Best thing that ever happened to me. He became a very bad person. And I was being influenced by him. I broke from him, found other friends, and became a lot happier person and a lot more properly centered. And lastly, he reminds us to stay strong. And thankfully, he reminds us that the one thing that I didn't start with, but we should all always start with, Father Brian started with it, prayer. One of the things I've learned over all the trials of parenting and helping parents parent in schools is we often jump to prayer when things get really bad. Look at it the other way around. Go to prayer first. Go to prayer always. Build in that quiet time to pray. The closer we get to God, the closer we're going to be to the whisper of the Holy Spirit. He'll guide us. He'll help us. He'll give us strength. But we need prayer. When it all falls apart, go to prayer again. Okay? What is St. Bernadette doing here? She's praying. St. Bernadette, I love thinking about St. Bernadette and St. Thomas Aquinas. Lived a few hundred miles apart. Okay, a few centuries apart too, but it was a few hundred miles apart. Here's this little peasant girl. She reached the pinnacle, people. Doesn't matter how many Super Bowl rings you have. She's better than them all. She's a saint. She won. And so did St. Thomas with his angelic mind that gave the church such a great gift. We're in the business of education. We care about education. But we care mostly about this. We want every child to be the best they can be. There. Thanks, Army. We want them to be what you want them to be when you hold them in your arms and you say, what do I want of this child? Thank you very much.